I want you to look at two tomato plants. Same seed, same soil, same water, same June planting date. We are in the middle of August now, and one of those plants has given me 41 pounds of tomatoes so far this season. The other one is still sitting there, green and pretty and full of leaves, and it has given me 11 pounds, 30 pounds of difference, from the same seed, on the same patch of ground. The one that gave 11 pounds looks better, actually. Bigger leaves, more stems going in every direction. If you walk past it, you might think that plant is doing just fine. And that is exactly the problem. That plant is doing what it wants to do, not what you want it to do. The plant that gave 41 pounds has fewer stems. It looks almost plain compared to the other one. When my father first showed me this, I thought he had made a mistake. I thought the plain one was sick. He let me think that until harvest. That was his way of teaching. Now I want to tell you what the difference is. It is not a bag of tomato fertilizer from the garden center. Those run $12 to $15 a bag, and most of the folks I have talked to have 2 or 3 bags sitting in their garage right now from seasons past. It is not a spray. It is not a liquid. It is not anything you need to buy at all. It is a practice. It is something your hands can do in about 20 minutes a week, starting from the first week after you transplant and going right up until the frost comes. And once you understand why it works, you will not be able to look at a tomato plant the same way again. My name is Elmer. My family has been farming this ground in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania for 4 generations. My grandfather's grandfather broke this soil. The way we grow tomatoes here has not come from a course or a book. It has come from watching what the plant does when you leave it alone and what it does when you work with it the right way. Those are 2 very different plants by August. I am going to walk you through the complete system today. There are 5 parts to it. Takes about 20 minutes the first time to understand. Takes about 20 minutes a week to do. Costs nothing. And if you get it right, you are not looking at 11 pounds from a plant this summer. You are looking at 30, 40, sometimes 50 pounds from one indeterminate tomato plant in a long season. That difference is not an accident. It is a decision you make or do not make in the first 3 weeks after transplant. Stay with me to the end because the last part of this is the one that surprises people most. It is what my grandfather always called the closing of the books. You will understand what I mean when we get there. I have put together a short guide through the Amish home savings system that Esther and I use to keep our homestead costs down through winter. Link is in the description if you want it. Now, let me tell you the principle that changes everything. Most people who grow tomatoes at home think about what they are putting into the plant. More fertilizer, more water, better soil, bigger cage, and those things matter. I am not saying they do not. But the reason so many home gardens get to June looking wonderful and get to August looking disappointing is not because of what went in, it is because of what was left on the plant. A tomato plant, left to its own judgment, will try to become a small forest. It will send out new stems in every direction. It will grow what we call suckers, which are new shoots that push out from the joint where a branch meets the main stem. Each one of those suckers, if you leave it, will become a full branch. That branch will flower, it will set fruit, and the plant will try to feed everything at once. Think about a well at the center of a farm. That well has a certain amount of water it can pull up in a day. You can run 1 pipe from it, or you can run 20 pipes. If you run 20 pipes, every pipe gets a trickle. If you run 1 strong pipe, that pipe runs full. The plant is the well, the stems are the pipes. Most home gardeners are running 20 pipes without knowing it. They planted 1 tomato, and they are actually growing what amounts to a small thicket by the time August comes. The result is a plant that looks busy and full and green in June, sets a lot of small fruit in July, and then by August is carrying so many half-finished tomatoes that the root system simply cannot ripen them all before the cold comes. You end up picking hard green tomatoes off the vine in September because the season ran out. You did not get less by doing too little, you got less by letting the plant do too much. That is the principle. You are not feeding a plant. You are directing one. A tomato plant has enough energy to grow 30 or 40 pounds of fruit on a strong root system. It does not have enough to grow 100 pounds of fruit across 20 unmanaged stems. Your job is not to pour more into it. Your job is to tell it where to put what it already has. Here is the system, in the order you would do it if you were standing in your garden today. The first thing is knowing what kind of tomato you have. This matters more than anything else in this guide, so do not skip past it. There are 2 types, determinate and indeterminate. Determinate tomatoes, sometimes called bush tomatoes, grow to a set height, maybe 3 to 4 feet, and then they stop. They set all their fruit in a concentrated window of about 3 to 4 weeks, and then they are done. Roma tomatoes work this way. Celebrity, Rutgers. If you are canning and you want a lot of tomatoes all at once for saucing, a determinate is good for that purpose. For a determinate, you do almost no sucker removal. You take off any growth below the first flower cluster. You remove leaves that are touching the soil. And that is about it. You leave the rest alone. If you start pulling suckers off a determinate tomato the way you would an indeterminate, you are cutting into your own harvest. Those suckers on a determinate are carrying fruit. Leave them. Indeterminate tomatoes are a different animal entirely. Brandywine, Cherokee purple, beefsteak. Most of the big heirloom varieties, the old paste tomatoes our grandmothers grew. These plants will keep growing until the frost stops them. They do not have a ceiling. They will go 6, 8, 10 feet tall if you let them. They will push out suckers all season long, and each sucker will become a full stem with its own suckers. An unmanaged, indeterminate tomato plant by the end of July looks like it is trying to take over the fence. The fruit on it is spread thin across too many stems, and a lot of it will not ripen before September ends. Everything I am about to tell you from here on applies to indeterminate tomatoes. Check your seed packet or your plant tag. It will say, if you are not sure, watch the plant. If it keeps going past 4 feet and does not stop, it is indeterminate. The second thing is learning to find the sucker. This takes about 3 minutes the first time, and then it becomes automatic. Stand in front of your tomato plant. Find the main stem, the thick central stalk that goes straight up. Now look at where a branch grows out from that main stem. In the joint between that branch and the main stem, right in that crook of the elbow, you will see a small shoot pushing out. That is a sucker. It will be green, and it will look like a miniature version of the whole plant, leaves and all. At first, it might only be an inch long. If you leave it for 2 weeks, it will be 8 inches. Leave it for a month, and it is a full stem with its own suckers starting to form. Remove the sucker when it is small, when it is between 2 and 4 inches long. At that size, you can pinch it off with your thumb and forefinger in one clean motion, no tools needed. If it has gotten longer than 4 inches, use a clean, sharp blade. That is important. A dirty tool spreads disease from plant to plant faster than almost anything else in the garden. My grandfather kept a small jar of rubbing alcohol next to his pruning knife all summer. He wiped the blade between every plant. That habit has saved more tomato crops in this county than any spray I have ever seen. Now, the error that most people make when they first learn about suckers is they become aggressive about it. They pull every single sucker they find. They want a single stem, one pipe from that well. That works in a greenhouse in Holland where they have got perfect temperature control and supplemental light, and they are growing tomatoes on wire 12 months a year. In a home garden in Pennsylvania or Ohio or Tennessee, one stem is often too lean. You leave the plant exposed to sun on the fruit, and you can get sun scald on your tomatoes, which is exactly what it sounds like. The fruit gets a pale yellow or white patch where it blistered from direct sun that the leaves should have been shading. What my family does is run 2 stems, sometimes 3, on a big, healthy plant late in the season. You pick your main stem, then you find the sucker that comes off just below the first flower cluster. That first sucker below the first flower is what some people call the secondary leader. You leave that one. You let it grow into a full stem. You remove everything else. 2 stems, both trained up a stake or a string. You get good coverage from the leaves to protect the fruit. You get enough air moving through the plant to prevent fungal disease. And you get focused fruit production on 2 managed pipes instead of 20 unmanaged ones. This alone, without changing a single other thing, is what produces the difference between 11 pounds and 41 pounds. That is the second part, identifying and removing suckers, leaving 1 or 2 leaders, starting the first week after transplant and continuing every 7 to 10 days all summer long. The third thing is the floor of the plant. This is what my father called cleaning the barn before you leave. Look at the bottom 18 inches of your tomato plant. Any leaf that is closer than 18 inches to the soil needs to come off. Any leaf that is touching the ground needs to come off. The reason is simple. Soil splashes when it rains. That splash carries fungal spores, bacteria, the early stages of diseases like early blight and septoria leaf spot. Those diseases move up the plant from the bottom. You have seen a tomato plant where the lower leaves turn yellow and spotted by July. That is what that looks like. The plant is not starving for nutrients. It is catching disease off the ground. Remove those low leaves clean. Smooth cut, close to the main stem, no stub left on. Stubs rot and invite more problems. Do this in the morning when the plant is dry, not after a rain when the cuts will sit wet. In Lancaster County, we always say, you prune when the dew is off and the sun is not yet high, mid-morning. The cut dries fast and the plant closes it quickly. Some people ask me, should I put those leaves in the compost? If the leaves are healthy and green, yes. If they show any spotting or yellowing, burn them or bag them for the trash. Do not put diseased plant material into your compost. It will cycle right back to your garden next year and start the whole problem over in the first week of June. That is step 3. Takes 5 minutes per plant. Do it every 2 weeks from transplant day onward. By the time August comes, your plants will have clean air at the base, and you will not be fighting the same fungal battle that wrecked your August harvest last season. The fourth thing is the tie. This one is not complicated, but it is surprising how many people get it wrong. When you are running 2 stems up a stake or a string, you need to tie the plant, and the way you tie it matters. Do not tie the stem tight to the stake. A tight tie cuts into the stem as the plant grows and the tomatoes get heavier, and it can strangle the water and nutrient flow in the stem at exactly the moment when the plant needs it most, which is midsummer when the fruit is sizing up. Tie loosely. Figure 8. The string or the clip goes around the stake and around the stem, and there is room between them. The plant can sway in the wind, and the stem can thicken without being choked. A tomato plant loaded with fruit is heavy. One large beefsteak-type fruit can weigh close to a pound by itself. If you have 8 or 10 fruits on a stem, and that stem is not supported, it will snap in a storm. I have seen people lose most of their August harvest in a single windstorm because the stems were not tied. 2 or 3 feet of garden twine costs nothing. Tie every 12 inches of height as the plant goes up. In a long season, that might mean 6 or 7 ties per stem before the frost comes. That is step 4, the tie. Loose figure 8, every 12 inches of vertical growth. Check them every 2 weeks as the stem thickens. If any tie is beginning to cut into the stem, cut it and retie it with more slack. 5 minutes per plant. Now I want to say something here about the money side of this before I get to the last step, because I think it is worth understanding clearly. The average American household spent around $600 on gardening last season. Seeds, soil, fertilizers, pesticides, fungicide sprays, cages, and stakes. A single bag of tomato-specific fertilizer at the garden center runs $12 to $20. Espoma tomato tone is about $14 for 4 pounds. Job's Organics is around $13. Most home gardeners are buying 2 or 3 of these products a season. They are also buying copper fungicide for the blight at $15 to $20 a bottle. Then, new cages. New transplants in May. Now I am not telling you fertilizer is useless. A plant grown in poor soil benefits from amendment. I am saying that the reason most home gardeners get disappointing yields in August is not a fertilizer problem. It is a pruning and management problem. You can pour fertilizer into an unmanaged indeterminate tomato all summer, and that plant will still give you mostly green tomatoes in September because it spread itself too thin across too many stems. The fertilizer fed the leaves and the suckers and the new growth. It did not move more fruit into your kitchen. The industry that sells you tomato fertilizer benefits from you not knowing that, not because someone planned it that way. It simply pays better to sell you a new product every season than to teach you the one practice that makes most of those products unnecessary. A gardener who prunes correctly and saves seed needs to buy very little from a garden center. A gardener who does not know these things walks in every April and spends $60, $80, $100 before they leave. I am not telling you a man schemed this in a back room. No one had to. It is worse than a conspiracy because it is a system nobody had to coordinate. It simply pays better to sell a product that feeds the plant briefly and leaves the gardener reaching for another bag next spring than to teach a person to direct the plant's own energy. That knowledge costs nothing and it lasts a lifetime. Now for the last step, and this is the one that surprises most people. This is what my grandfather called closing the books on the season, and it is the practice that I have seen the fewest home gardeners know about. Around 4 to 6 weeks before your first expected frost, you do one more thing to your indeterminate tomato plants. You top them, you find the main growing tip of each stem, the very top of the plant where it is still reaching upward, and you cut it off. Clean cut, just above a set of leaves. That is all. Here's what happens when you do that. The plant gets a signal. The growing tip of a plant produces hormones that tell the rest of the plant to keep building upward, keep making new stems and leaves and flower clusters. When that tip is gone, those hormones drop. The plant stops reaching. It stops putting energy into new growth it will never be able to finish before the cold comes. And it turns all of that energy toward the fruit that is already on the vine. Tomatoes that were still green in the first week of September will start coloring up in 7 to 10 days after you top the plant. Tomatoes that were sizing slowly will fill out. I have seen this add 2 full weeks of effective ripening to a plant's season. In Lancaster County, our first hard frost comes somewhere around mid to late October. Without topping, a plant that had a big, late flush of fruit in August would still have green tomatoes on it when the frost came. With topping done in early September, most of those tomatoes had time to come fully ripe. This is not a new technique. Commercial greenhouse growers have been doing this for decades. What surprises me is how few home gardeners in this country know about it. The seed catalog does not mention it. The bag of fertilizer does not mention it. Nobody who sells you something in April is going to tell you about a practice you do with your bare hands in September. The mistake people make with topping is doing it too early or doing it too hard. If you top a plant in July, you stop new fruit from setting, and you lose the late season harvest that would have come from August and September flowering. Wait until you are 4 to 6 weeks from your expected frost date. Look at your region's average first frost using the Old Farmer's Almanac if you are not sure. Lancaster County is roughly mid-October, so I top around the 1st of September. Minnesota might be early September, so they would top in late July or early August. Florida might not need to top at all because the growing season extends well past when plants exhaust themselves naturally. When you top, also remove any flower clusters that have just opened at the top of the plant. Those flowers are not going to set fruit and ripen before frost. They are taking energy that could go to tomatoes that are already sizing. Be honest about what has time to finish and what does not. A green tomato the size of a marble in the last week of August is not going to become a ripe tomato before October in most of the country. A green tomato the size of a golf ball in that same week has a real chance. Concentrate the plant's energy on what can actually finish. And here is something Esther figured out years ago that I always pass on. When you top the plant, take those tip cuttings that still have a few leaves on them and put them in a jar of water on a sunny windowsill. Indeterminate tomato cuttings will root in water in 10 to 14 days. Come spring, you have new plants from cuttings of varieties that performed well for you last year. That cutting knows how to grow. It came from a plant that already proved itself. No seed starting, no waiting for germination, no buying transplants in May. Esther has started next year's plants from this year's September cuttings for as long as I can remember. It costs nothing and it takes 5 minutes. So here is what I want you to do this week. If you have tomatoes in the ground right now, first, go out and identify what you have. Check the plant tag or look at the plant. Determinate or indeterminate. If you do not know and the plant has already passed 4 feet and is still reaching, treat it as indeterminate. That is the safer assumption. Second, look at the base of the plant. Strip any leaf that is within 18 inches of the soil. If you see spotted or yellowed leaves anywhere, take those too and bag them. Third, look for suckers in the joints of every branch. Pick the one strong sucker just below your first flower cluster and leave it. Remove every other sucker you can find. If they are small, pinch them. If they have gotten larger than 4 inches, use a clean blade. Fourth, check your ties. If the plant is leaning or the stems are bending, add new ties, loose figure eights, every foot of height going up. Fifth, count the weeks to your average first frost. If you are within 6 weeks, top the plant today. If you are more than 6 weeks out, mark your calendar for when to do it, and do not forget. Total time, 20 minutes per plant the first time you do this full audit, 10 minutes per plant after that when you are just maintaining. There is no product I am asking you to buy. There is no amendment to order online. What I have described here is the way tomatoes were managed on working farms before the garden center existed. It is knowledge that kept well in the hands of the people who farmed for a living because those people could not afford to get it wrong. When your livelihood depends on the harvest, you learn what the plant actually needs, and you do that. You do not buy something because the label says it will help. I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me where you are in the country and what your tomatoes have been doing this summer. Tell me if you have been pruning or if this is the first time you have heard about it. Tell me what variety you are growing. I read every one of these, and the regional questions in particular help me understand what is working where. Every climate is different, and I learn from what you share. Next week, I want to talk about soil, specifically about what happens underneath a garden that has been fed with chemical fertilizer for 10 or 15 years versus a garden that has been fed with compost and cover crops. The difference you can see with your eyes is something, but the difference you cannot see is what I really want to show you. The number of living organisms in a teaspoon of healthy garden soil is something that will make you think differently about what you are putting into the ground and what you are putting onto it. That is coming next. My grandfather used to say that the man who works with the land learns something new every season, and the man who works against it learns the same lesson every spring and never understands why it keeps repeating. The tomato plant is not your enemy. It is not trying to give you less. It is just trying to do what plants do when no one tells them otherwise. Your job is to have the conversation. 20 minutes a week, all summer long. The plant will answer back in August with more fruit than you have room to carry.